Hello and welcome to episode 193 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we officially have some roster mania confirmations. I think a pair of them, and we also have some rumors, some confirmed stuff, albeit pretty light on the CDL front, and then Black Ops 7 beta stuff that will be very, very relevant by the time that you're listening to this podcast. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
All right. Yankees pulled out a win in a do or die game, so it gave me the strength to hop on and get another episode of Ego Chall done. It's been a couple weeks since we last did one, so not a ton that's gone down, but like you said, got a couple roster mania things and some Black Ops 7 stuff before the beta kicks off later this week.
Yeah, so the first thing I think we should just get out of the way is FaZe officially announced, and we talked about this on the last episode about the rumors and the reports that this was going to happen, but they officially announced the rebrand from Atlanta FaZe to FaZe Vegas. And then they also announced their roster in the meantime, which, again, that roster had been rumored for 3 months now or so, which is Simp, Draza, 04, and aBeZy, which is a very interesting roster. If you want to go back and listen to, I'm sure it's like 188, 189, something along those lines, where we discussed that potential roster at length. If you want to go back and listen to that, I would very much encourage that. But I think we should just kind of wrap it up with FaZe. Any final thoughts on this roster now that is confirmed, and also the move from Atlanta to Las Vegas?
Well, the most interesting thing for me, and I was just saying it before we um, actually went live because it might trip me up a little bit, is that the rebrand is FaZe Vegas and not Vegas FaZe.
Yeah.
So obviously it was Atlanta FaZe previously, and I was just gonna check real quick. I mean, as far as I know, Optic is the only team with brand first, and Optic Texas. Every other team is location then brand. So that now FaZe is joining that. If you want to consider it the upper echelon of unique branding or whatever, and having the team name before the location. So that's definitely interesting. I definitely feel like that's going to trip me up here and there because I don't think anyone ever really thought too much about it when the report came out of just like relocation to Vegas. I think I just assumed in my head it was going to be Vegas FaZe. Um, so that is a little interesting to me. I wonder if there's any actual strategic uh, motivation behind choosing FaZe Vegas over Vegas FaZe. Um, I'm not sure how much of a difference it really does make, but I just think it is interesting. Um, and it definitely caught me off guard for a little bit, but maybe that's just me. But yeah, in terms of the roster, we'll get to LAT in a little bit here, but um, from everything I've heard recently, mostly LAT did a podcast with its new roster. And I think I saw a clip of Simp kind of talking about it. And it was basically, to paraphrase, it felt like after Champs and EWC to end the 2025 season for FaZe, that trio of Cell, aBeZy, and Simp didn't actually talk about what they were gonna want to do, but it almost like an unspoken thing that they were just like, yeah, we gotta split up and make a change here. So I found that a little interesting in terms of like them not actually allegedly not actually having a like conversation, especially considering how long they played together and just like seemingly silently agreeing to part ways. So I found that a little unique, but end of the day, yeah, that's the big thing now for any of FaZe's matches is FaZe versus Falcons with Simp versus Cell, or FaZe versus LAT with Simp versus aBeZy. Then there's going to be some juicy narratives and storylines around that. But really, end of the day, like you said, we've talked about this roster at length even before it was officially confirmed. But now, just it feels like it's a interesting um, pairing of a former Vancouver Surge duo with Draza and Simp. And the only thing I have really said about it up to this point and thinking is that FaZe has to see something in 04 and aBeZy in the sense of them having so much success last year and getting to grand finals, but then stumbling at the final hurdle and not able to lift a trophy. They got to see something in those guys that they feel they can tap into to help those guys secure their first championships. So definitely going to be a lot to talk about at length with this roster very early on and throughout the season. But end of the day, we got the confirmation now. We know this is going to be the squad. It would be interesting to see how Simp plays with the first other real SMG duo he's ever had in his career, and also the first new main AR that he's had since Clay, basically with United, I guess. Um, you can have Arcides in there if you considered Arcides the main AR over Celium for a time, but splitting hairs there a little bit. Nonetheless, he's got two new guys on the team that he's never played with before. Will be interesting to see how things work out for Simp and the newly anointed FaZe Vegas squad.
I think the name thing is pretty. It's pretty smart because when we inevitably get to the point where they just get rid of the city names, it is more helpful to already have your brand name up front, like Optic, because even just thinking about like how we talk about these teams, of course we do say FaZe, and like when it was Atlanta FaZe, we would say FaZe sometimes, but a lot of times you just default to Atlanta, and when you talk about LAT, for example, like I don't call them Thieves or anything. I say LAT or LA or something like that. But now, like when it's up front, I just kind of default to FaZe or Optic. The other one was C9. C9 is also C9 New York, I believe.
Yes.
But they stink, and we don't have to talk about them very much anyway. But I was just thinking, because we haven't gotten the other rebrands that were potentially coming this offseason, which was Toronto rebranding from the Ultra to Koi, which we might see that become Koi Toronto realistically, or it could be Toronto Koi. And then G2, we saw the branding was kind of G2 up top and then Minnesota below. So I don't know if that's something that they're going to go for and say that it's G2 Minnesota, or if it's going to be Minnesota G2. Personally, I just think it's smarter to just put the name up front, and like G2 has literally no connection to Minnesota, so it would just make sense to do that for them especially. And same with Vegas and FaZe. I don't think that there's like some deep connection. I know there was that one report that said like the ownership group has some ties to Las Vegas. I don't know the extent of that or the validity of that, but it's not readily apparent, I would say. So it's better just to be FaZe. And I think I'm also growing on the logo now that I see it, and I'm not all the way in. I do think it's better than the Atlanta FaZe logo personally, but it's it's whatever. Also the colors, I think we should say,
True. Yes.
They obviously red, black, and white has been FaZe's colors for pretty much ever. Although they did go through that blue and yellow phase for a while, no pun intended. But now when they did this announcement, they're pink and black and white. I get pink, purple, something along those lines. So I do think that's pretty interesting. It does seem to separate this team from like the FaZe clan, which has been predominantly red, white, and black. But again, very small thing. But I just thought it was something interesting. And the matches are going to be off the chain with LAT and Vegas, or not Vegas. See, that's exactly. I didn't mean to say Vegas FaZe. I meant to say Falcons with Riyadh, which I'm probably just going to be calling them Falcons, to be honest. So, yeah, I'm very excited about those matches. And we've talked so much about like the rankings in like the top 10 or top 15 or whatever, and how you pretty much can't separate aBeZy and Simp on like any level. Even though I would say Simp was like, if Simp and aBeZy are 4 and 5, for example, I would always put Simp at 4 and aBeZy at 5, but it's very hard to separate them much more than that. And Celium, I mean, most of his pro career has also been with those guys, so just going to make for some really, really intriguing matches, especially early in the season when everybody's trying to get used to their new teams and the game and all that stuff. But we should also talk about LAT because they also announced their roster, which again would have been rumored for months at this point. But it was they announced the return of Kenny and the addition of aBeZy, as you said, coming from Atlanta FaZe. I'm pretty skeptical about this roster. I think I believe it's a healthy skepticism personally, because Kenny had by far his worst season as a pro last year. aBeZy, I think probably 2 years ago or 2 or 3 years ago was probably his worst year. But I think there have been more and more doubts about what he can do or kind of his impact on the game, at least compared to what he was in the 2021 season, I believe it was, where we were talking about like he's either going to win MVP or Simp's either going to win MVP. There's no debate about that. That's not where he is right now, at least going into this year. I think he has a really good opportunity to kind of change that narrative, and so does Kenny to even a greater degree. Now that this roster is officially confirmed, what do you think about LAT going into the season?
Yeah, I think that's most likely the one element of this roster that most people are gonna be questioning or critical of is just Kenny's role on this team. I said it whenever we talked about the first report or when this was the reported foursome of Scrap, Hydra, aBeZy, and Kenny that I am absolutely like so excited to see aBeZy and Hydra as a sub duo working together. Like, it's pretty tough to say what I'm about to say considering aBeZy played basically his entire pro career with Simp as his SMG duo, but I don't think it's over dramatic to say that aBeZy and Hydra could go down as the best SMG duo of all time. And it would be comparing that to aBeZy and Simp, so it's already, you know, pretty good sub duo to be contending with. But I'm just really excited to see how they work together. Um, and I really do think like when you think about Hydra at his peak, which I mean, there's some people who would probably say like we might not even have seen the best of Hydra yet. But really, what I'm trying to say, when you think of Hydra's best season, which is when he won champs in 2023, won MVP that year, I believe, and won multiple tournaments and champs. Um, he was playing with Kismet, who was, you know, a facilitator, did the dirty work, sure had his pop off moments and stuff, but he was that entry sub, and Hydra was able to follow him up and, you know, get his trades and you know do everything you expect. Like they worked very well together, and I think aBeZy is the closest to Kismet's play style in terms of Hydra's teammates between Kismet and aBeZy. Um, but obviously aBeZy is, very well known for being the first blood reaper and doing all that stuff, and um, that's most likely where Kismet. I mean, they're probably around the same age, so it's weird to think about that. But regardless, I mean, Kismet and aBeZy are comparable in play styles, even though aBeZy is, undoubtedly a better player, except for maybe when Kismet goes final 99 Kiz mode. Um, but regardless, yeah, really excited to see how aBeZy and Hydra work together. I do think Kenny is just that one question mark for this team, and it's going to come down to what Kenny shows up for LAT. Is it going to be the Kenny who struggled last year, or is it going to be the Kenny who's a multi-world champion, a top 15 player in Call of Duty history, regardless of what think about the past season, potentially a top 10 player of all time in some people's eyes? If he shows up in any of that form, as opposed to what we saw last year, that's potentially makes LAT the scariest team in the league. And I always go back to one of my interviews I did with JCap, and it might not have even been like he said it on broadcast many times towards the end of his career with the Envy squad that was winning uh, won champs in Black Ops 3 and then lost in the champs finals in IW to Optic. His thing was he's teaming with Slasher, John and apathy, and I forget the exact way he said it, but it's always stuck with me all those years where he's like, if I'm the worst player on if I say I'm the worst player on my team, I'm okay with that because I know how good I am. So if I'm the worst one, that means everyone else around me is really good. And that's kind of how, like, regardless of what you think about Kenny historically in his career, I don't think it's like even arguable to say he is the quote unquote worst player on this team when he's playing with uh Scrap, who was the MVP this past year. Hydra was the MVP 2 years before this last one, and aBeZy, who was champs MVP when we had that whole debate about who should win MVP in Cold War between aBeZy and Simp. So he's playing with three of the best players in the game right now. Uh, so no matter how much stock you put into last season, I don't think anybody would disagree that Kenny has to be viewed as the quote unquote worst player on this team. It's just a question of how much that actually matters because if Kenny comes back and fries like we've seen him do in past titles, this team is super scary. So and there's also the reality where he doesn't have to do anything except collect hill time because Scrap, Hydra, and aBeZy are getting all the kills on the map. So I'm really excited to see this squad. I definitely do think all eyes will be on Kenny in particular, as well as seeing how aBeZy and Hydra work together. But I think this definitely is an exciting squad, and should be interesting to see how they make it work.
Just to play devil's advocate on that point about Kenny being the worst player and then, all that talent around him, that was probably the case with Optic, obviously before like Skies came into the roster when they had like their world championship team. And I would probably say that Kenny was definitely performing the worst. I don't know if he was the worst, but he was stinking up the joint at the very, very end. And then the other, and I think more apparent counterpoint would be just Atlanta FaZe in general. Obviously, Kenny not being on that team, but we talked about it so much about how that foursome of Draza, Cell, aBeZy, and Simp is one of the most talented and most ridiculous rosters that you could probably construct, considering all the success that Draza had before FaZe, and obviously all the success that FaZe had with that trio, and yet they came up short when it mattered most. So that would just be my devil's advocate or counterpoint to that idea. But I think there's it's a they have faith, LAT does, in Kenny, and I think a lot of pro players around the league also have that faith in him. I don't know how long that faith kind of sticks if he doesn't have a good start to the season, for example, because if it was like last year where he has a poor start, his team has a poor start, there was obviously some kind of like optimism, like, okay, well, this is Kenny, we're a world championship roster, we're going to figure this out, it's just a rough patch that we're going through right now, and we're going to be good eventually, if we hit midway and we're able to kind of find our gear and get going. Obviously that didn't happen. Now I think if that happens again, I don't necessarily think it will, but if it did, I mean, there's just no way around it. I think LAT at that point would be like, oh, like, we need probably do something. But I just don't know if they're really going to be able to do it if they start even remotely flat to the beginning of the season. Like, who are they going to replace Kenny with once they get into the season? We've always seen that in-season roster changes are very hit or miss. Like, you could have a Neptune where it's like, this is the best possible result ever. Well, I'll get second best result because Mercules is probably the best result, or somebody like Simp or something like that. But like, for the most part, bringing up Neptune was a great result, but most of the time it doesn't work out, and it just kind of delays the inevitable, and eventually those teams typically break up. And LAT, I think most of those guys are like, their contracts are due at the end of the season. Specifically Scrap and Hydra, I think, was the rumor that they're free agents next year. If they don't perform as a team, I mean, they could pretty much just name their asking price, I think, in the league, and especially if the Falcons are committed to throwing around some cash still at that point. But I'm probably jumping the gun. But I just did want to kind of jump in there. And one last thing on LAT, because I think it's just it's funny. TJ on stream saying that LAT dropped their best player, Dan Ghosty. I wouldn't go that far, but I think I made it pretty well known how I did not like that Dan Ghosty was getting dropped or whatever the case may be here. But I don't know. I mean, he's not going far. He's going whatever cross town, uh, because
Allegedly,
yeah, reportedly.
if
Um,
they don't rebrand either.
yeah, he might be going to Paris instead of
Yeah.
across LA. But yeah, we'll see what happens with LAT and how Kenny starts the season. Um, let's kind of move out of I guess two last things on roster mania stuff.
Yeah.
Nastie reportedly joining the Boston Breach. The only change that we know of was Awakening getting dropped by Boston. There had been rumors that Snoopy was going to head down to Miami and join the Heretics. That doesn't seem to be the case, according to Ronnie Intel. Nastie is being eyed as the replacement for Awakening for the Boston Breach. I really like this move. I think this is kind of like a buy low scenario for the Breach because Nastie is, I think, a pretty good player. I don't think he had nearly the season that he was expecting to have last season. But I mean, Boston. What I've judged these roster changes on is, do I think that you just got better? I don't. I didn't think at any point that Boston was a championship contender last year. I certainly don't think it if they pick up Nastie, but I think that they're probably better with Nastie than Awakening. How much I'm not entirely sure, but what do you think of this potential move with Nastie reportedly being eyed by Boston?
Yeah, I think it is a move that you could look at in multiple angles. I think if you asked me straight up, do I think Nastie joining Snoopy, Purge, and Cammy, Nastie over Awakening, do I think that's a better move? I really don't know what my answer would be because I do think Nastie inarguably had an extremely good year last year when people probably weren't expecting a lot out of him.
Yeah,
I know, speaking about it, really, it was when Neptune first joined the team during the start of the major two qualifiers or whatever. I was noting that it wasn't necessarily always Neptune who was popping off. It felt like Neptune was allowing Nastie and aBeZy in particular to really open up more and make more plays on the map behind Neptune. And it felt like Neptune joining that squad really elevated him uh, to another level, and obviously that resulted in him and Surge reaching multiple finals. From a pure slaying perspective, I feel like I would still think Awakening has an edge over Nastie in terms of like if I need to pick one of them to go out and get 40 kills in one hardpoint map, am I picking Awakening or Nastie? I probably am picking Awakening, but I think the experience that Nastie gained over the last year in getting to those grand finals could be invaluable to this team as a whole, but in particular Snoopy, who is just, it's pretty clear now Boston is trying to keep him as long as it can and build around him. Um, Obviously, Cammy had some experience before as well, but now you're bringing in another guy who can try and, um, you know, help mold Snoopy into an all-around player and learn to uh, what it could be like to because they went on a run at champs at the end of last year, right? Obviously, uh, didn't result in reaching a finals, but like that's the next step for Snoopy. Really, is what's it going to take for him to consistently get to championship Sundays and try to uh, hoist a trophy because we saw over this last year him being a pretty consistent well-rounded player. So I think if this move comes to fruition, it does feel like maybe some of the slaying pressure is going to fall even more on Snoopy and Purge. But Nasty still showed this past year he's a really solid player. And maybe he's just ready to take that next step as a Slayer if he doesn't have, guys like aBeZy and O4 and Neptune around him. Maybe that's just like the next step in Nastie's evolution as a pro. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the biggest um, element or aspect of this report is where does Toronto go from here if Nastie does go to Boston, because it felt like that was the guy we were kind of both um, thinking, at least when we talked a couple episodes ago now at this point, when the whole Real stuff was going on. If it's Real, Joe Deceives, and Kleenex at the flex, who's going to be that main AR? And it felt like if Insight doesn't return, Nastie was potentially the best available main AR after like Sib reportedly went to Gentlemates and all the other moves that have happened. So now, if Nastie isn't available, I think it becomes a question of does Toronto bring Insight back in again and just run that back, or are they going to try and get um, another young player for the main AR role out of Challengers? So that's what I'm most interested in terms of this Nastie report. But good for Nastie. Based on what we know about Boston, I don't know if this is actually him like getting a pay raise or anything like that, but obviously, uh, based on his season last year, it would have sucked if he was in a position where all his other teammates are getting on really strong teams and he was just on the outside looking in. So at the worst, he's reportedly still in the CDL, and I think Nastie proved me wrong at some points last year and proved a lot of other people who probably thought even worse about him than me wrong at different points last year. So I'll just be excited to see what he's capable of if he goes over to Boston officially.
Yeah, and like you said, the experience that he gained from the the Surge experience, like that's crazy. They went to 4 grand finals, including champs grand finals, including EWC grand finals. The previous year with LAT, they went to the EWC grand finals. I just think that kind of experience is very, very valuable for Boston, which Cammy's had that kind of experience before, but years ago now, like because he was kind of out in the wilderness for a while. And then obviously Snoopy has not had that. Purge has not had that. So I just think it's a great thing for Boston if they are able to bring in Nastie. And I still stand by. I think that they're going to be better relative to what they were last year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be any higher in the standings than they were last year, because this is a really competitive league. And what Nastie was great at with at the end of that 23 season with LAT was he didn't have to be like even the second guy. He could be the third or fourth guy in every map, and it really wouldn't matter because he had someone like Joe Deceives and Ghosty to kind of lean on. And the same with Vancouver. Like he never really had to be the second guy on the team. He could always kind of hang back and be a supporting player. With Boston, it's going to be a little more challenging in that role. I'll definitely admit that, because the best case scenario for Snoopy would probably be someone like Joe Deceives. And I mean, that would be awesome for Boston to have someone like that. But they don't have their version of Ghosty from that 23 LAT season, which kind of makes this pretty difficult for them moving forward. But I think it was always going to be difficult because they don't have a name, the name brand that players would want to go to. And it certainly doesn't seem like they have the money that they could lure in players, to compete against Riyadh or Optic or LAT or FaZe or anything. So we'll see what happens with Boston in that regard. And I think the only other roster mania news, technically not on the roster, but C9, we talked about them, I believe, on the last episode about the report that they could have the lowest budget of any team in CDL history. I think both of us were pretty incredulous at that claim, but Ronnie Intel has been very reliable on these matters, and he put that in one of his Breaking Point articles. So I don't think really have much of a reason to not believe it. but they are now they now have a new head coach. Of course, they had accuracy last year in his first season as a CDL head coach, even though, I mean, technically he was like, or unofficially he was kind of coaching Optic near the end of the champs season, or he was reportedly pitching in on the S&D front, which is always nice. But now C9 has a new head coach, and that is Arian. I believe he was he with LAG at some point as an assistant coach, um, under the current LAG coach, and I mean I don't know anything about him. I don't know like if he has the lowest budget or the lowest like payroll in CDL history. I have no idea what he could do with that. But that would also make me think that it's going to be a challengers roster that he's going to lead, and I wish the best for him. I don't know. What do you expect of Arian leading C9 as their new head coach?
Yeah, I think it's a sign that the report is uh, potentially true in terms of C9's potential budget for the upcoming season. We don't know about any potential moves at this point, and they hire a head coach who has some coaching experience, but isn't exactly, a coach who would command top dollar if, just in, if you don't have the experience of being a head coach. It's not like you're going to go out there and ask for the supermax contract uh, from a team that's seemingly not in a position to pay a ton. So it's interesting in that regard. He did have a separate tweet after the tweet went out, and he mentioned the LAG backroom staff he worked with Marky B, Mayhem, VOs, and It's Cheek. I'm pretty sure Arian and Cheek were two guys who did some stuff back on the podcast with Nameless. I just remember the shits as, which is his at is shits as CHIT SAZ. I always heard that on the podcast when he would comment or ask questions or do voice ins as shit's ass. But so that's why the name stuck out to me. But yeah, he mentioned that LAG experience and then working with accuracy in C9 last year. So if anything, this is just like he was an assistant coach last year. He's promoted to head coach after they decided to make some moves. But he said, I'll end it by saying, don't believe all the rumors and believe me when I say the C9 project is now well and truly underway. Nothing taken for granted and everything earned. Obviously, he's not going to come out and say, oh, yeah, the report's true that had the lowest budget in CDL history.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see how exactly C9 tackles this offseason, which is weird to say because the offseason's technically almost over at this point, and we have heard absolutely nothing about potentially what their roster looks like. So, this isn't exactly a one-for-one situation here, but I remember it would have been back in that 2023 season of MW3 when they had the LAG situation with VOs, I believe, and it was like Enable had that now famous clip of being like, I don't even know who this guy is as coaching. The team's gonna suck, yada yada. And then they had a pretty decent year. It wasn't like a great year, but they, made some noise and definitely weren't as bad as a lot of people expected. So at the worst, this is a similar situation that C9 could be in. People are expecting them to have an inexperienced head coach and a team that is being formed at the last minute. Like the bar is set very low for expectations, but if they put in the work and do what they got to do, they could prove some people wrong, and it's only up from there if people set the bar so low for you. So we'll just have to wait and see how things shape up for C9 here over the next couple weeks.
Yeah. So Arian, I would assume that Cheek will be joining the coaching staff as well, because Aaron and Cheek are brothers. So
That's what, yeah.
and Cheek was on the, obviously, like you said, on the staff with LAG. He was an analyst at the same time that Arian was an assistant coach under VOs. According to his COD wiki, Cheek didn't do anything last year, because he left LAG in 2024, so he didn't have any official, I guess, involvement in the CDL in 2025. Like you said, Arian was the assistant coach for accuracy. He was on the staff with Tupac as well. Tupac got fired during the season, uh, very very publicly. And I don't know what to expect. Obviously, when I don't know what to expect with any of these coaches, whether they've had head coaching experience or assistant coaching, because a lot of it just comes down to, it's kind of like a general manager in traditional sports. What players are available? How much money do you have available? Can you actually get those players with that money? They're super late in this process, even though there are obviously a lot of teams that have not confirmed their rosters. It seems like a lot of them are still set in stone, even if they haven't been announced. We really haven't had a ton of news about C9. It's been a lot more kind of wishy washy and like pretty much nothing on that front, and that probably makes sense why, because they just hired their head coach like 2 weeks ago, and I think that just backs everything up. Um, I, I I don't know, like I just don't believe him when he says don't listen to the rumors, and that has nothing to do with him. But like you said, what kind of coach is going to come in and say, yeah, those rumors that we're broke and we're not going to spend any money on this
Yeah.
roster, like just buckle up. That's not how you kind of get it started. And so I definitely believe that it's true. I still hope that he's able to pull it off. He is in a very similar situation to the LAG situation that you just mentioned with VOs, and that Arian was an assistant coach for. They did not have a ton of money, but they were able to identify some good players and make something of it, even if it wasn't great. That's probably the best case scenario for them, because this definitely feels like a rebuild year, even though rebuild years shouldn't happen when you don't have a draft. But they just kind of need to just say, okay, like we're gonna save our money. We're gonna try to develop or identify some young players, maybe some. I really think the challengers route is the way to go for them anyway, and just be like, maybe we get lucky on one of these players, and then that can turn into something down the line, or we can sell them off to a bigger team and get some money, and then that kind of starts a snowball effect. Something like that, I feel like should be the plan moving forward for C9.
The one thing, I mean, you just mentioned the challengers route. We mentioned it early on in the offseason. There's reportedly a rumor of Surge signing the Omit roster that did well at EWC of Craze, Mamba, Vivid, and Mac. Mac would have that C9 connection from just this past year, so he would know what it's like working with Arian. So maybe, we haven't heard anything else on that Omit roster potentially going to Surge or potentially going anywhere else. Maybe that's an avenue C9 pursues just because of that connection with Mac. I don't really know, but that your comment there kind of just sparked that idea in my head. The only other thing I just thought of too while you were talking about, if you go back to whenever we talked about the C9 budget thing, I did a little tinfoil hat uh, segment where I was saying that Cloud9's League of Legends team had a down year this past year in North America, and maybe that is affecting the CDL budget because uh, they might want to revamp the LOL team, and maybe that requires C9 to allocate more funds to league than the CDL. That was pure speculation on my part. But just to go full circle with all that, 7 hours ago today, Cloud9 League of Legends announced their new head coach, who's a Nero, and he's been in the scene for a long time, multiple roles on multiple teams, and they got rid of their previous coach. So it could be similar to what you said in the sense of Cloud9 League of Legends is got its new head coach now, and maybe uh, if we're thinking of the COD team doing coach first, then roster, that could start the process for the league team now for C9. And if, again, tinfoil hat conspiracy thinking here, like if they want to uh, prioritize the league team. It could be even longer before we hear uh, more about the actual COD team now that we're just hearing about the new head coach for the league C9 squad. So that's all speculation on my part. Probably not going to hear that from anybody else in the COD community, but just getting it out there because I just saw it and just thought about it.
You're tapped into the LTA, which I didn't even know was the LTA until like 2 months ago. So
it's not anymore. They just announced that they're going back to the LCS after 1 year of the LTA.
that is beautiful news. I was about to say this dumbass name. Like, I saw the LTA and I was like, is this the Latin American League? What's going on here? But yeah, C9, they're probably gonna suck. So we'll see them at the beginning of the season. I mean,
I'm not gonna lie. I would like that if anyone. Again, you mentioned this whenever we talked about the report of Surge being potentially interested in that Omit roster. You've talked in many episodes in the past about wanting to see a challengers team that did well in
the full
challengers
team
get an opportunity to stick and fully go to the CDL, and instead of just like getting bits and pieces from one strong challengers team and having them go multiple directions. This seems like, at least on paper, an opportunity for Cloud9 to do that, especially if we have heard literally nothing about any player. It feels like to me it would be like a slam dunk if Cloud9's just like, yeah, and at least for Craze and Mamba, that you'd be giving two players their first opportunity in the CDL, and then Mac and Vivid, it's two guys who have been in the CDL before and most likely aren't commanding top dollar salaries because they might not be getting a ton of opportunities at this point. So it feels like to me that would be a slam dunk opportunity for Cloud9, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, I just think you look at last season, how Champs ended up. Granted, Optic made roster changes and stuff, but like two of the top 3 teams at Champs were Vancouver and Boston. Vancouver made one roster change after Major 1, and then they stuck with their roster the rest of the way. Boston never made a roster change and were the most, I think the most tenured roster in the league, maybe aside from FaZe. It was like, I think FaZe had Draza longer, but like Boston was like the second most tenured team in the league, and they finished 3rd. Obviously, it's more fluky that they did that. I don't think that, if you played back Champs 10 times that they were always going to finish 3rd or whatever, but like, I think chemistry really, really matters, and it's seemingly more important the last like 2 or 3 years than ever before. I'm not sure exactly why that is, to be honest, but it just seems like the chemistry really matters more now than it ever has before, and like just putting together a great group, a great roster, isn't always like the quick solution, or the I guess the permanent solution is really what I'm looking for, because LAT and FaZe had like a great season, but then when it mattered most, it didn't matter at all, it seemed like. So I just think especially if you're going to be at C9 and you're probably going to be fighting to get to champs, not to fight to win championships, but just try to be in the top 8 to get to champs, and we'll talk about maybe potentially the major as well. But like that's something that you have to think about. Like, are you able to kind of crawl over Carolina, and are you able to crawl over Boston? Are you able to crawl over Minnesota and whoever else you have to, whatever that 9th place team would be, to get into the top 8? And I think just having a team that is already comfortable with each other, they know their strengths and weaknesses, they trust each other, I think that's really important. And even if it doesn't work out, I think it's a good exercise or a good attempt at it, and it's a better solution than just kind of running back like the same old players that are always kind of like rotating in and out of the league. Next up, we're done with Roster Mania stuff for now. Obviously, we're going to talk about it on the next episode, about if there are any more confirmations or any more rumors, because we don't even have like rumors for C9's roster at this point, but hopefully we will as we get closer to the beginning of the CDL season, which, according to our good friend Miles Ross, who was on the COD Next stream, he did not say literally anything else except that the CDL will be returning in early December. So I would assume that's first or second weekend of December, if I just had to guess, because I think it was like December 7th last year. I would expect it to be right around the same time, which is fine by me. Like, obviously, we both advocated for it to just start as early as possible to kind of capitalize on the success of the release and the hype that is all around the release. I did just see something as you were talking like 20 minutes ago. But did you see when ranked play is coming in Black Ops 7?
Did not.
It is coming season 2, and I about lost my mind because I looked it up to make sure. Black Ops 6 season 2 started January 28th. You idiots. What are we doing, man? Like, that makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, it has to either be on launch or it has to be season 1 reloaded. There's no other option here because season 1 reloaded was, I think, December 4th or December 7th. It was like the first or second week of December. I think that is the perfect time. If you don't want to do it on launch, I still disagree heavily. I think it should be like a season 0 unranked thing to get things kind of worked out with a massive player base to kind of help over the first 2 or 3 weeks of this of the release, and then ranked play can really kick into high gear. But season 1 reloaded, that would be a month after release or somewhere around that. That would be the perfect time for it. Season 2 is just, it's ridiculous, man. Like, that means that the season, the CDL season, when the, like, these are the people that are essentially advertising ranked play. Like, in all honesty, these are the only people advertising multiplayer ranked play. And they start their season in early December. So all of December goes by, and then almost all of January goes by, and then ranked play begins. Do you know how many people have left Black Ops 7 by the time January 28th comes around? That makes no sense whatsoever. And I'm not blaming it on the devs necessarily, unless I get confirmation, and then I will certainly blame it on the devs. But like, this is just a consistent and chronic issue that is so easily solvable. Do not put it that late. It makes no sense. It's like putting camos, like, CDL camos in the game when it's like June 21st. Like, it doesn't matter at this point. So, I just got really upset about it when I read it on Twitter. And but yeah, I thought I'd bring it up because obviously we were talking about the CDL season starting, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that news that I just broke to you.
No, I will. I mean, I thought ranked play came with launch of Black Ops 6. The AI response that I'm getting at the top of Google says it Black Ops 6 ranked play launched on November 20th, 2024. I don't know how true that is, but uh, launch for Black Ops 6 was October 25th, and launch for Black Ops 7 is November 14th. So on that ranked play front, season 2 could be even later than January, just because Black Ops 7 has a later launch date. But to circle back to the CDL element of it, the later launch date of November 14th for Black Ops 7 with a start date for the season of early December, plus what we know about the league historically liking to do the holiday break and whatnot, it means it's possible that the CDL season is starting 3 weeks after the launch of Black Ops 7. So that's been what I know I have said historically on the show, is starting as close to the launch as possible uh, to try and play on that hype is important. And I think 3 weeks is, obviously we've both said it before, like, doing some sort of tournament launch weekend where the players all have had the game for the same amount of time. Nobody's at a disadvantage or anything like that. That would be cool to see. Just probably logistically would be a nightmare to try and set up, and with the servers and everything for a brand new game. But 3 weeks seems like a pretty uh, just that's a window that I can live with in terms of launch of the game to launch of the CDL season itself. From the ranked play aspect, I just know this past season with Black Ops 6, there were a ton of issues with cheaters and hackers, and it just seemingly was never addressed to the point that I know a lot of the pros, like, and even top streamers, like, haven't really been playing ranked play right now. They've been doing chows on Black Ops 3 or Cold War and older games, so it's not like they're even playing ranked play right now in the previous game ahead of Black Ops 7. They're going back to just play like wagers and stuff on older titles. So I think that speaks to the state of ranked play in itself, and based on everything we know about the COD devs and their seeming, unwillingness to dedicate a lot of resources to the competitive scene, it's pretty safe to assume that they would have like whatever code or system they're using to do rank play in Black Ops 6. It would probably be very similar to like a copy paste job of Black Ops 6 rank play, drag it over into Black Ops 7, and that's ranked play. So I don't know how much they really have to overhaul, but at the same time, I don't know if they're going to be able to address the cheating and hacking that has seemingly caused a ton of the top players to just move on from the mode entirely over the last few months.
And I saw something about Ricochet. They announced something today about I think like PC users have to enable a certain setting to kind of beef up Ricochet. I don't know the extent of it. Obviously, I'm not on PC anyway, so it wouldn't matter like regardless of anything. But I just don't think like there's no possible upgrade that they're realistically going to make that would justify the delay, for it to be like you said, it might not even be late January. It could be further than that. And we know this season isn't going past like June or July. So like so you get like what, 4 months of it? Because once like the holidays kind of wear off, people just like start trickling off anyway. But when the CDL leaves, and the CDL season ends, like competitive fans just kind of tune out, and I'm sure they go and they watch other games or they go play other games because they're just not focused on Call of Duty anymore. And I just think that's a really big missed opportunity. And I just wanted to say, because you said like 3 weeks between the release date and the first tournament, or the first matches, we'll say, because they're probably going to be 3 or 4 weeks of online qualifiers and then get into the tournament. In 2013, I only remember this because I went to the event, but in 2013 when Ghost came out, Ghost released on November 5th, 2013. 17 days later, MLG hosted their first event of the Ghost season, which was MLG Columbus. And so like 17 days, there's travel days involved. So like really they had like 2 weeks of practice on Ghost before their first event. And I'm sure there were complaints. I don't remember people complaining at the time about like the lack of practice or whatever, but I would take that in a heartbeat now, to just be like 2 weeks after launch, we're going to play a tournament. We're going to make it a major or a minor if you don't want it to be as important or whatever, but like we're going to bring people together and we're going to play a tournament, and it's going to be fun, and we're just going to see what happens. I think that's an exciting idea. Maybe Call of Duty, I just thought about this, maybe Call of Duty needs to go to like a college basketball model where like they have like the in-season NIT and all of those like holiday tournaments that they do where people go down to the Bahamas, or UConn goes to like Puerto Rico or whatever. Maybe something like that would be good for Call of Duty, where like the week before Thanksgiving, let's say, the CDL is like, we're going to fly you guys out to Vancouver, for example, and we're going to do an event there. It's going to be 3 days, and then you guys go home. You have the week off for Thanksgiving, and then we'll start the matches up again the week after Thanksgiving. Like something like that, and then they just kind of start the schedule from there. But yeah, I just don't. I was very frustrated by that. Just very emblematic of like the issues that we can consistently run into with the CDL. And on that note, I think we should talk about the report from Jacob Hale, formerly of Dexerto. He tweeted on September 22nd that, according to his sources, the Call of Duty League is considering trialing an 8-team major in the 2026 season, the 25-26 season, whatever. I don't have as big of a problem with this as other people do, because, a lot of times it doesn't matter in general, but I think when you have, if they had a bunch of events, if they had as many events as I want them to have, which is like, I think I said 10, 10 events in a season, then it would be more feasible, right? Because then it's like, well, you get more chances. You guys will get to events eventually, except if you're like the Vegas Falcons, like in the first half of the season, like you're never going to get to an event. But like, it just, I don't know. If you only do like 4 majors in a season, maybe 5 majors, and you only have 12 teams in the league, but only 8 teams get to the major, like you really are probably only going to see like the same 9 or 10 teams like every other major. And I think that's pretty disappointing, especially for those fans. Like Optic, for example, wouldn't have gone to majors for a little bit this season, which that's not great for the CDL. And I don't know if they really thought about that or if they're just thinking about the cost of like, that's whatever 4 times 4, 16, whatever the coach is, like that's like 20 fewer tickets that we have to buy, 20 fewer hotel rooms and all that stuff. I don't know what the justification is, but I think that it's a pretty sad state. Do you feel the same, or are you more like it's whatever?
Yeah, I think I actually the element of the report that I like the most is that the CDL is allegedly considering doing an 11 match round robin qualifier split, according to Jacob Hale, which would mean that each CDL team is playing every other CDL team for the seeding of an 8-team tournament. And that's really cool, and I would love to see that for all majors. It probably doesn't make the most sense, but it would be more frustrating for me if they were going to do an 18 tournament and still stick with like 5 or 7 matches, and then we're looking at scenarios where Team A is playing the 5 worst teams in the standings, and Team B has to play the 5 top teams, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, maybe that one team is better, but they just had a harder schedule, and that's the reason they're not at the 18 major. If every team has to play every other team to qualify for the 18 major, then there is no excuse for like not performing, or you played every other team. It's not a strength of schedule thing as a reason for missing the tournament or something like that. So I think that's an interesting element to this. It seems like this is apparently for Major 2, which is reportedly going to be at DreamHack Birmingham in March. So I do think it is possible there is some financial motivation, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
or some motivational, financial motivation to lower the number of teams because, like you said, then they're just paying to send less people to the UK. So logistically, that does make a little sense to me. But if they do an 11 team or just 11 matches for every team to qualify for the 18 major, I think that's like the best of both worlds. We've talked about it many times over the years now. There are multiple tournaments where some bottom of the barrel team shows up to an event, plays one series, gets 3-0'd, and is eliminated in 30 minutes. And it's like, well, I just flew to this location to literally play 3 maps, and now I'm going home, and that's the end of my tournament. By doing an 18 tournament versus a 12-team tournament, you're effectively getting rid of those 4 teams that are just getting eliminated in the first round of the losers bracket. Um, so it could make the tournament a little more competitive. Potentially eliminating 4 lopsided matchups. It is potentially uh, eliminating like a miraculous. It's getting rid of one round of the lower bracket. So if some team drops down to losers bracket and goes on a run from losers bracket round 1 to winning the whole thing, it does shorten that run in terms of comparing it to some of the other legendary losers bracket runs we've seen. But uh, yeah, end of the day, I think it's interesting that the league is considering it. We talked about last year. The minor tournaments, we both thought that was a pretty good inclusion, and that was really like the first um, tournament esque change that the CDL implemented. They've tweaked the CDL points almost every year, and they've tweaked the amount of events and tournaments. But that adding the minor tournaments was like the first tournament addition that they added to the existing CDL system. So potentially trying a different size for a tournament and seeing how that works out is, like, at least in my eyes, potentially the CDL trying to weigh its options in terms of what it can do in the future, or it could simply be a cost saving measure in some sense. So multiple different elements to it. I'm sure we'll hear more about this as it gets closer if this is decided. But end of the day, for me, I would really like to see 11 qualifier matches for every team, for every major, whether it's 8 or 12 teams. Might be some people opposed to that because those would most likely be online matches, and that would mean more online matches, and there are people who don't like that. But I do think that is like the most fair way to do these seedings, is have each team play every other team in the league. But yeah, I might be in the minority on that front.
Yeah, I'm opposed to that just on the basis of like my whole um, philosophy for competitive Call of Duty, at least in the current era that we're in, is fewer meaningless or seemingly meaningless matches and more higher stakes matches. And we've just seen from the last few years that the qualifiers, like whether they're 5 matches or whether they're 7 matches or whatever, they just don't really have a lot of juice behind them, except when they get to the end of the season and it actually means something for champs. Like obviously it all means something. Like I don't want to like discount that, but you definitely feel it, you definitely can sense it, that when you get to May, that those teams are really kind of like, holy crap, we might miss champs. We have to win however many matches to make sure that we get in the top 8 by the end of the season. I just don't think that it's going to be that way if we add another 4 online matches. And even if we kind of give the motivation is like you might not go to the major, I just think like not going to the major is not going to be as great of a motivating factor, for lack of a better term, than not going to champs, for example. I did also see that Jacob, who's now with Esports.net, he posted an article about the Optic guys commenting on this. And so Hex on one of the podcasts that they do, Hex said there has to be some real punishment to losers for losing. I don't think that this is the way personally. And then Methods, I think he brought up a really good point on this specific issue. He said this gives an unfair advantage to 8 teams that do qualify. Let's say one of the top teams gets upset and they don't make this tournament. They're potentially missing out on a ton of points. And he said, I'm severely against this. At the very least, I wish they do this in the US. I think the UK fans should get a full-blown major because of how long it's been. I didn't even really think about that aspect of it, but I do actually agree with that point that, I mean, if where like the esports arena in Arlington, Texas doesn't get a 12-team tournament, boo-hoo, but, because they've had a bunch of these events already. But if, Birmingham, England, and Europe, who haven't had a major in years at this point, if they don't get, some of these teams, like, for example, because I'm sure if Gentlemates, especially if they rebrand to Paris, I'm sure there will be some Frenchmen that make their way up to Birmingham, England to support Gentlemates. But if Gentlemates don't make it into the top 8 for that qualifier set, and then they don't make it to the major, I think that would be a gigantic miss. I don't know who the most English team is. It used to be Toronto, but I don't know if there's like an English team, but I'm sure the same will be for Heretics. I'm sure people from Spain might make their way up to England for that event. If obviously Heretics makes it to the major, which, who knows? Like I think it's most likely that they do, but we see that all the time where some of these really good teams just have a horrible qualifying set, and then they start in the losers bracket. But at least they started in the losers bracket. They have some kind of chance to make it up on LAN, and we don't. I don't necessarily think there's a ton of difference in the results, at least like from 1 week online to 1 week on LAN for the most part. But I'm sure players feel very differently, and it could be of pretty pretty big importance, I think, if things work out like this. And the second major is 8 teams instead of 12. So I don't know. I'm against it. I don't think like you're totally for it, but you're for the idea of the fairest distribution of these qualifying matches, which has always been kind of a pretty crazy like sometimes you're playing Optic, FaZe, LAT in one qualifier set, and then in the next you're playing the Vegas Falcons and Carolina Royal Ravens, and it just didn't really make a ton of sense. I just wish there was a better way to make these matches more exciting. I don't think the bounties that they used to put on them, I don't think that's
always go back to that.
Yeah, I don't think that was going to work. So whatever their plan C is, hopefully they can figure it out. Only a few more things here. Clay, our sweet Clayster, rest in peace. He he tweeted, or he was on stream, and he just was pretty much criticizing how horrible the CDL scheduling is. And that's why Clayster's always been my favorite pro anyway. So what did you think of his comments, or just he's still with, I almost want to say Vegas, but with Riyadh, as far as I know. I really think they're gonna host an event. I feel pretty certain of it. But the scheduling is not going to be great regardless. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think he kind of iterated some of the same things we were talking about when we were talking about like the start, getting it as close to the launch of the game as possible, and then he brought up a point of like there's some over the years there have been the events that have been like scrapped or whatever after being announced, and we have to hold events without fans or whatever. Yeah. And the other element was there's like points where they don't even have the venues actually booked before they're announcing, or they're just waiting long to lock down venues and locations for events, and that impacts the scheduling. So that was a while ago since I watched that clip in full, but obviously Clayster knows what he's talking about when he's talking about COD stuff, and he knows a lot more than us in terms of what goes on behind the scenes too. And if he's sharing our thoughts on that and even expanding on them in terms of issues with scheduling and whatnot, I'm gonna back him on that no matter what.
Yeah, I mean they should be like it. We've talked about it before. Just not even like the planning aspect of like the logistics, but just the idea that we are about 2 months away from the beginning of the season, and we don't know even when the season really starts, because Miles just said early December. I mean that gives us a vague idea, but if you got to whatever, like the NFL starts like the Labor Day, like the weekend after that typically. If the NFL was just like in June, they're already in like mini camp, and all the players and all the draft picks have kind of reported to camp, and Roger Goodell's like, season will start sometime in September-ish, like we'll see. I think people would lose their minds. Like the schedule for the NFL is released so far in advance of the actual season, so people can plan. Like that's kind of the idea, is like we tell Steelers fans, hey, these are the games that you got week 4 and week 7 and week 9. So like if you want to buy your tickets or you want to book a hotel, that's kind of like what we're going for. We want you to actually go. We want you to watch it on TV. We want you to get excited about what we're doing. The CDL is just like, be there or don't be there. We really don't care one way or the other. If you're not there, it just gives us a better excuse to just kill this league and move on with our day. I mean, that's what it seems like. But I mean, prove me wrong, CDL. But I don't think they will. And then the last thing was one of the bigger topics over this little break that we had between episodes. And it was the news that the teams had voted, and they said no coaches on stages, which was kind of a point of contention before EWC. Obviously, coaches haven't been allowed on stage since like 2015, I want to say 2016. Maybe it was when the CWL, the first iteration, came around. I think that might have been the time, but I think it might have been gone before then. But it's been years and years since this was even a thing. But EWC decided that they would have coaches on stage for their tournament. And obviously Optic won, as they did with Champs when Karma wasn't on the stage. But I think people were pretty excited, especially Optic fans, about like having one of the greatest Call of Duty players of all time standing behind one of the most talented Call of Duty rosters of all time, who just won two of the biggest events in Call of Duty. That would happen again this season. It's not happening. Karma kind of just went off in Twitch chat. He said he called him a bunch of wussies for not voting for coaches being on stage. He said, I think it's the players crying. I don't know. Didn't waste my time with the call. Didn't want to hear it. And then Simp reacted to that, said players only gave feedback from EWC after the event. We never had a vote for anything. And then Zuma, excuse me, I when I said that the players voted, I was wrong on that. What Zuma said is that the CDL itself made the decisions that coaches would not be allowed on stage next season. So I don't know what the deal is here. I think it's pretty interesting that the CDL made the decision and not giving it to the players and the coaches to vote on. What do you think about this whole ordeal, I would say?
Yeah, it's been a while since this went down, so
Yeah.
I remember it like it started as like Karma talking in Ben's chat or whatever, and then it kind of like went back and forth from there. Um, but that was really like, it became a thing at EWC at the end of this past season, and there were a lot of people opposed to it, but I feel like at EWC itself it really was like a non-factor, and some people even argued that like adding the extra voice could like hurt the comms more than it helped. um I think it was maybe on one of the Optic podcasts, the Optic guys were saying that Karma was basically like just trying to fill dead space and, call out like who was alive in some situations or who would be the first one to spawn up or something like that. So, you know, I feel like if this was implemented, some teams would eventually pick up on what exactly the coach would be, what type of information would be helpful to relay while the team players are focused on the most crucial elements of
Yeah.
communication. Um, but I feel like I remember when this was a thing for EWC, we were both kind of like it's kind of cool that they're um, including it for this tournament, but it most likely isn't gonna move on from there. But it was like a testing ground to see if it worked out, and if it was decided by the league that they're not going to go forward with it, then it is what it is. I don't think at the end of the day many people are going to care that coaches aren't on stage like this. But I do remember saying like maybe in a worst case scenario, like this is just it becomes like an element of esports World Cup every year, and coaches aren't allowed on stage for the CDL majors and champs and stuff, but they are allowed on stage at esports World Cup. That would be cool in my eyes, like just like a one-off thing every year where like there's going to be a different element to it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it's a major factor at the end of the day though.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. But it certainly would help some teams, just like
Hmm.
that players that aren't very good at communicating, or maybe just kind of lose focus at times when they really can't. Because I forget whose stream I was watching, but um, oh, I think it was Octane. Octane was watching one of the matches, and he was losing his mind because he's like, rotate to bomb, and he just screamed it like 20 times in a row. And he was basically making the point, even if he wasn't trying to, that like in that scenario a coach probably would be yelling at that player and like reminding them like, no, rotate, and like that's probably the biggest key. If they were allowed in S&D, and even honestly literally any of those game modes, like there's a lot of like really small pieces of information that can be valuable to those players. Like like who's holding one angle, who's holding another. Like you guys are watching the same thing. Like if just going back to that Minnesota versus Optic match, the infamous one where Scump had a breakdown on Twitter. That probably doesn't happen if like Rambo is on stage, because Rambo's like, you guys are like literally lining up. Please don't do this. And like, it probably just doesn't happen. So that's a good thing. That we didn't have it then. Same thing with like Karma's Ninja Diffuser, and literally any Ninja Diffuse probably, because a lot of those coaches would just be like, "Can someone check bomb, please? Like what are we doing?" And but we get those great moments. But like you said, I don't think it matters, like one way or the other. If this was something where we had this for the last 10 years and then it was banned, it'd be a much bigger deal. And teams and players would just be losing their minds about it. But I think most of the players and the coaches are like, I never really thought that was going to happen, so it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other. But I think that about does it. We're about an hour and 15 minutes into the podcast. Really appreciate everybody that tuned in or is listening. Evway in the YouTube chat, appreciate him stopping by. Yeah, like it's been for a while now. Do not know when we're going to be doing our next episode. We didn't end up getting to the Black Ops 7 stuff. We just kind of ran over with the roster mania and some of the other CDL ranting material that we had. But Black Ops 7 beta starts today when you're listening to it, probably on October 2nd. So the next time that you hear from us, we will definitely be talking about what happened in the BO7 beta, some of the things that the pros tested out or how they feel about the game, even though many of them were at Next and were able to play and kind of give some of their opinions on the matter. But we'll see exactly what the maps look like, which is probably the biggest point. They have 6 maps that are going to be in the beta: Forge, Cortex, Exposure, Imprint, Blackheart, and Toshin. Again, don't know any of those maps. You just see the picture, but we'll find out very, very quickly how good or bad these maps are and whether they have any viability in competitive. But yeah, we'll talk about that the next time that we're here. We appreciate everybody listening and watching. Please subscribe wherever you're listening or watching on, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks, at Preston Byers. The podcast tour is at Ego Chall Podcast. And like I said, next show is to be determined, but it should be sooner than later, at least with this episode, because we actually will have something to talk about with the Black Ops 7 stuff. And with BO7, that probably means that the rosters are going to be coming together a little bit quicker because players are going to be playing with each other and trying to figure out what the team looks like on this new game. So I think it's all kind of coming together. And before we know it, we'll be doing our first pick'em of the season, and I will be beating Bink for a 3rd consecutive season. But yeah, that's it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys, as always, for all support, showing love, tuning in, all that good stuff. On the Black Ops 7 front, 2 things I'll just throw in real quick, and we'll obviously expand on them more when we are talking about the beta and what happened and all that stuff. Is early impressions from the M8 are that it's really good, and that was one topic we talked about a couple episodes ago. If you remember us talking or reacting to initial trailers and stuff, is I was saying that my fear was that the M8 was going to be too good, or just to a point where the community, the pros would immediately want to GA it, and then we would be unable to have a burst gun in the pro meta. So I was hoping the M8 would return and not just be super OP. Early impressions seem to indicate that people are already considering GAing it, so that's just unfortunate. Maybe as this beta comes out, the M8 will get nerfed a little bit before launch, and then fingers crossed, maybe it'll find a way to not get GA'd, but early impression is that might not be the case. The other thing I saw was that the overload game mode that's being like teased or whatever as a potential replacement for control had like some element of the objective with like a radar pulse, or basically a UAV. And the dev from Treyarch had to come out and say that they disabled that in the CDL variant of the game mode, and was talking with Trem about the fact that that was even like a part of what they consider a potential competitive game mode just like blew both of our minds. So that's interesting. We'll have to see if that mode is a part of the beta and we get to like test it out and whatnot. But that was something else that caught my eye from the Black Ops 7 stuff. But yeah, like Preston said, we'll be talking a ton more about Black Ops 7 once this beta actually drops now very soon and people get a chance to play it. We'll be able to talk about the early impressions and the maps, like Preston said, how the guns work in early stages and all that good stuff. So yeah, it's been a bit of a slow off season to this point, but seems like things might be heating up now, and we'll have more to talk about. So yeah, if you've been tuning in over the last couple of months, appreciate you. Hopefully, we'll have more to talk about here very soon. And yeah, until next time, remember to send the chow.